So, the Hangout is live. Hello, everybody out there. Good afternoon from all over Europe. This afternoon, we are restarting our E2OS expert talk. My name is Björn Negemann. I'm part of Congress Media. We are organizing this kind of events like the Enterprise 2.0 Summit, where we always use this hashtag E2OS, and this is commonly known. And for the E2OS, well, between our conferences, we always do also this expert talk on Google Hangout, and I'm happy to have a nice crowd this afternoon with me to discuss the state of the UK's social business and social collaboration evolution. So we are just up to organizing another Enterprise 2.0 Summit in London, which will be in November, and for this, in preparation to this, I did some interviews with some experts last time, or I think it was even the time before. So in July, I think it was, when I was over in London for one of those social networkings on the topic of Enterprise 2.0, which is organized also by David, Terrar, and the Agile Elephants. I took the chance to ask some of the people who attended this session about what's the UK in terms of how far are the companies evolving or emerging into this social thing and the social transformation internally. And yes, the results has been some nice a little interview series, which has been published also on the YouTube channels. And we want to talk about these results this afternoon. And with me for this, I'm happy to have with me, just right next to me, I will show her now, Virpi Oinonen. She's the author of the social intranet book, A New Way How to Do Business. I think the title is not rightly correct, but Virpi, you can introduce yourself just right afterwards. Then next, Virpi, we have Luis Suarez, also into this session this afternoon, not directly from the UK, outside of the UK as me, but certainly he's the insider of the UK business, long-time IBM staff member in the social business area, and well, he has some very thoughtful insights on this. He was also on the interview series. Then we have joined forces at the Tech UK offices. We have David, Terrar. Well, for me, he's on the right, and on the left we have McCrossan as well. She's not yet on the lower third there, but she is also a social business expert. And last but not least, we have Alan Patrick here, also from the Agile Elephant. He's partnering with David on this new adventure on bringing the companies within the UK on the pathway to the social business. So that's the crowd we are having with us. So let's start with an open question again. So to summarize also your views, maybe we start ladies first. We start with Virpi and then Anne, because Anne, she's the only one who hasn't been in my interview series, so she has an additional view probably on this. So, but Virpi first. So, what is your statement on where the UK companies in regards to the social business and social collaboration evolution?
Well, I personally come from an internal comms background, so I wouldn't, and the people I talk to tend to come from that background as well. So, based on that, I would say there's a lot of enthusiasm, but the problem is that the people who want to really drive social business and social networks and social tools internally are still quite junior staff members, and their main problem, at least when we discuss this, is getting senior management on board. And so there might be a couple of projects internally inside bigger companies that are working quite well, but when it comes to the whole organization, that's a completely different story. And you hear success stories, but they tend to be from a kind of very certain part of the company, and I haven't come across stories that would kind of be about how a big company would have actually managed to integrate social into processes and become like a truly social company. But that is my experience.
Great, thank you. So Anne, you're next. So as I said before, you haven't been interviewed at that occasion. I did my interview series. So what is your statement on where are the UK companies in regards to social collaboration?
Well, hi Bjorn, first of all. It's interesting because I come at it from a very sector-specific point of view. I do a lot of work looking at different sectors from a macro perspective, and what I see is that different sectors are adopting social business in different ways, which kind of makes sense because they're doing different things, and so therefore the processes that they are emphasizing within their businesses are different types of adoption. But I think it is piecemeal. It's very much driven by the transactional requirements of each sector. So I'm thinking specifically around things like, for example, the food business, food retail, or charities, or housing, or legal services. They are emphasizing different elements of the social business mix. Some of it may be the algorithmic mining of data. Some of it may be thinking about business modeling in a deeper level. But what I'm seeing is a patchy adoption, and it's definitely not the same across different sectors. For me, I think it's important to dig into the specific requirements sector by sector, and for us as facilitators and change makers to try and create different approaches in order to deal with those issues so that they can be encouraged to take a more holistic view appropriately according to what different businesses need.
But if we talk about change, well, Virpi mentioned before that a lot of social initiatives are still driven by more or less junior people. If we talk about change, then we have to involve also the senior level of the company. So what are your experience on who is in the project?
I think there are quite a lot of change makers who are recognizing that this is an imperative for their business at the C-suite level. What they haven't quite got to is the ability to create an integrated, strategic, if you like, plan of change which connects the dots. You know, the phrase designing for connections, not divisions. You know, we're still very much in kind of difficult times, austere times where share of wallet is not easy to come by. And that's, I think, provoking tactical responses in terms of adoption. And what I'd like to see is the people that can start to connect at a director and a board level coming up with a conjoined approach to wholesale transitioning to social business. I don't think we're there yet. Okay,
great, thank you. So let's go next with Louis. So an external view on what is the UK at, also in comparison with other countries within Europe in regards to the social business or social collaboration evolution.
Well, I think, well, first of all, thanks for inviting me, Bjorn, into the event and everyone else, and thanks for those watching. I think what's interesting and what's happening, we see a slight evolution and maturity of what conversations used to be, say, 5-10 years ago. You know, if you look into it, you know, when we first started with all of the whole thing around Enterprise 2.0 and everything else, the conversations was about, you know, why do we need to do this, right? And everyone was thinking like, you know, this is going to be a fad, it's going to be just a bunch of fancy tools, and we're going to do them for like 2 years, and then we move on. 2014, the vast majority of countries, and especially in Europe, and especially in the case of the UK, along with other countries like Northern European countries like Germany, for instance, the conversation has no longer, or does no longer start with why do we do this, but is how do we do that, right? So I think what Anne mentioned, that now is being considered as an imperative for most businesses to go digital, is actually what I find really interesting from the UK market, right? Where no one is actually trying to justify the reasons of not doing it, right? So every single business is trying to figure out what their actual strategy around that digital transformation would be like. The really exciting thing is that every business is different and unique, and it's going to take time for each of them to adjust to the new reality. But one of the things that is contributing big time into the whole effort is the London hub as far as the tech startup world, right? And how it's also spreading into all the cities. Like, if you go up north into Manchester, into York, and everything else, you will see how technology, again, is no longer be seen as a barrier in order to do business. Is actually being thought of as an enabler to actually conduct business. And the key thing that is happening in the UK is that there's very little talk about social, right? At least I haven't seen it as often as I have seen it in other countries. So there's more down to how do I go digital with my business, understanding that, what Virpi mentioned about some senior C-suite executives having issues with taking a more upfront involvement and leadership role. If you take off the word social, because some of them obviously are panicking around that whole concept, and you just basically move on and you think about the whole thing around digital transformation, the barriers are actually a lot less, and there are lots of senior executives that are actually acting as change agents. Probably not as many as we would hope for, but let's face it, we're here for the long run, right? We're not here for just be done tomorrow in 2 years or 3 years time and then get it done. This is a transformation for life, right? And whether your business is ready to do it now or later, it won't matter. The opportunity is how most of those businesses are saying, how do I do it? Where do I start?
But you said before that actually the businesses are aware on why they should do this, but I would question this. Are they really aware of why they should do it? Because if you mention then in your second part of your statement that if we leave out social and go back to business and do business with these tools, then they haven't not yet really acknowledged why they're doing social. Are they?
In a way they are, but they may not have done it consciously, and I'll explain what I mean with that. So there are two different types of businesses right now that are paying attention to social business and digital business. The ones who basically just want to get on board at the bandwagon because they're late, and late means that their competitors have already been there for a while, and they're eating up their customer base like you wouldn't believe it. So they're being forced to actually make the move, right? Which may not be the right incentive, because probably they're not provoking the transformation as it probably could happen across the board in the organization. But at least they're saying, we can no longer afford being out there because our competitors are there and they're snatching our customer base, right? So that's one set of businesses that I can see and that I have interacted with from the UK, and this will probably apply to most European countries as well. And the other one are those are the businesses that understand that in order to survive, they can no longer ignore digital. So it becomes a mere matter of survival, which is why socially it becomes redundant, because it's just business. How do I make my business flourish at a time when most of the interactions are happening digital, right? And that's what is actually happening, that most people are coming to terms with the fact that this is a situation where rather you are coerced into provoking your own digital transformation, and you can take more of a proactive role. My take is that those that are coerced because they may be late into the game or they may be a bit reluctant, they will struggle, right?
Okay.
And lucky enough, I don't see enough of that happening in the UK. It's more the proactive saying, how do we do this before getting hammered, right? And why I find it really interesting, because in some other countries, I mean, if you go into Southern European countries, like Spain, where I live, it still hasn't come up as part of a conversation, and that's worrying, right? But then again, if you take that in the short-term mentality, I will probably say that we are in big trouble. But if you take it into the long run and you understand that some countries take it slower than others, and that therefore you need to be patient for them to adjust accordingly, it just becomes an evolution. I mean, I keep telling people how You know, I got involved with social networks around 2000, so that's 14 years ago, and I still have got conversations that I used to have in 2003 and 2005 and 2008. And what happens is that with all of those rich experiences, you keep amplifying the conversations from things that you know now that you didn't know before, and you make that conversation even much more interesting, and you help people advance faster than what we did, for instance, 8 or 10 years ago, just because of that accumulated experience. Right?
Okay, Alan.
Mm.
So in one of the last, well, there you are. In one of the last social business sessions in London, those networking events, you also brought up a short summarize of the specific of the UK market in regards to the social business. Can you just give some words on this?
Yeah, I think I'd probably go along with mostly with what Anne said. I mean, our generalization is that the Northern European market, which tends to be most of the case studies we're hearing in your conferences, Bjorn, also it's a lot of stuff that's been written, tends to be very operational, and I think that's because of the industry structure of a lot of the Northern European countries. There's a lot more industry, manufacturing base, big operational things going on there. The UK, in my experience, tends to have been led much more from the social media side, sales, marketing, PR, than operations. And that's really been the fundamental difference in the two at the general level. I'd say dropping down, I'd go along with what Anne's saying is, depending on which industry segment you're looking at, they have different pressures. But in general, I'd say in the UK, social media has been the major driver, and even the case studies we saw at like your IOM conference at Barclays, it was guys trying to and look at their operations rather than I think what you see in Germany or wherever it's good operations discipline by operations people, which is making them interested in using this to improve the way they run things.
Yeah, but if we take the case study of Barclays, which is fairly driven from the customer service part of the company, which, well, the Barclays case study will also be part of the London event. So is it true that maybe certainly the UK social business evolution is more being driven from the external to the internal than rather from the internal to the external?
I think the industry structure is different. I'm also foreign. One British is a nation of shopkeepers. I think it is a trading nation. So I think in the UK, my observation, having worked here and in Europe and the States, is there's far more emphasis on the sales. There's much more of the company power in the UK comes from sales. CEOs are often salesmen, whereas in Europe it's often more the technical people who tend to get to the top of companies. There's more power in that area as well. So I think it's a combination of culture, it's a combination of where the power is, and I think it's a combination of the industry structure. There's a lot more trading that goes on in the UK, and thus there's a lot more interest in customer, just getting customers, keeping customers happy, and so on. And certainly the work I've done, a lot of the work I've done myself in the UK has been sort of customer services then driven, or reacting better to sales requirements has driven operational improvement.
Okay. David, you recently published a nice piece about the enterprise digital wave, and which should be the driver for going also social. Can you please explain this a little bit?
I certainly can, and I'd like to chip in a couple of extra things too. But yeah, I mean, that was all about trying to pull together the digital landscape and basically say that we've got a digital enterprise wave happening, and either you decide how you're going to ride that wave or you'll get swamped by it. And the wave really is all of the economic and infrastructure things that are happening, the fact that we've got this big shift of cloud, social and mobile happening, and then on top of that we've got other emerging technologies coming along like big data and the Internet of Things and 3D printing, and each one of those are going to, they may not be very developed today, but in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, they're going to be very significant and could be game changers to do with the way that we do business. So you've got all of that wave of things happening. Now, interestingly, over the last 6 months, I think there's something different happening in the marketplace. I hear the word social being used a lot less, and the word digital being used a lot more. And Anna and I are talking to you from Tech UK's office here. Last night, they announced and they launched a new annual conference for the UK. They're actually going after your market, Bjorn. They're trying to create the UK version of CeBIT, and only they aim to make it even bigger than CeBIT. God knows how. But they're after creating a big technology conference as an annual thing, and really it's recognising all of these things. And I think that businesses are waking up to the fact that their business model is under threat, and that actually you've got to, unless you actually adopt these new digital and social and collaboration technologies, some smarter, nimbler competitor is going to come around the corner and take away your market. And I think that we know that as digital and social insiders, but I think the average business person is actually getting to that point, the realization that everybody is under threat is happening, and so the average business person is much more inclined to listen to deploying our kind of technology.
So in your argumentation, it's digital that forces business to change, and within this change they use social. So, and question to you, also in your change projects that you are involved, is this argumentation or be in the background as a driver for the change, and then also leading towards a social evolution, or so another way of collaboration within the company?
I think what's interesting, just picking up on David's point, is that most businesses that I interact with have yet to fully conceive what their business might look like in a digital future. And to give you an example of that, a very real example, a year ago this week, the BBC published an article with the headline, "Imagine a world without shops or factories." And I often use that in some of my mentoring sessions because it seemed at the time that it came out as a very fanciful headline. And yet when you look at the type of industries which have become virtual, you can sort of understand it. Today, they published a headline which is that the number of shops is reducing in the UK. So in the space of just a year, what was a fanciful headline is now a reality with the statistics to prove it. And I think what's catching businesses on the hop is that what we're seeing are very, very big changes, but happening in very small ways. You know, when you have a handset in the palm of your hand that has the power to disrupt industry, it's easy to overlook quite the seismic nature of the shift. And to help businesses understand what might their business be in a digital future, what might their strategic positioning be when product is not the whole game, the service of data provision maybe is a way to augment their business or to think about their strategic positioning. That conversation is yet to be had. The reason it's not being had is I think that there's a lot of reticence to say this is actually the end of an industrial era without necessarily some sort of widget solution to pop in its place. This is about transition and over a period of time being responsive to data as we understand marketplaces to be evolving. And there isn't the management C-suite sort of level, if you like, of really understanding how might that then affect a strategy for a business, especially when there is a lot of legacy. So whilst there are conversations happening, I think there's a next level of awareness for people like us to, if you like, start to instigate, which is if you have a lot of heritage as a business, if you have a goodwill, reputation as a brand, how would you translate that into something perhaps quite different from the model that you're using at the moment, but something which is fit for a digital future? And that's the kind of conversation I think we need to be having now.
Virpi, so I'm addressing to you as a part of the representative for the communications department, as you introduced yourself earlier. So you said the communications people are not really getting this. Do you see a gap a little bit, or did I get it wrong?
I think you're right to some extent. Yeah, communications people, and in this case, internal communications people, have been a bit slow to see the benefits of social, which are partly because they are, if you come from a traditional communications background, you push out messages from senior management. Let's say there's a change in strategies, communicate that, and there's a newsletter and stuff like that. But they don't really understand the shift that is taking place in business, like, you know, that Anne was talking about. They don't really understand that. And at the same time, they might feel a bit threatened because obviously new ways of working that would come from this shift are challenging the ways traditional communications is done. So why wouldn't you talk about it? And but the the kind of younger staff who are in internal communications, they, I think, kind of have a slightly different approach. They kind of understand that they, instead of pushing messages out to staff, they have to kind of work with the staff or kind of become curators and help the business more. But yeah, I mean, it's fundamentally challenging internal communications in many ways. I mean, it not necessarily, if you take a different angle, it isn't. But if you are planning to do communication in a traditional way, it is, in my opinion. And yeah, unfortunately, that is the case often. And internal comms would need to kind of shift their focus a bit and also understand the business, be interested in the business. Really, how does it work? What are the drivers? And many comms people don't have that interest, I find.
Would you both, David and Anne, agree on this?
I absolutely would. I had a conversation with a client just this morning, actually, about wanting to help an entire team, you know, sort of several hundred people, become digital by putting in a new director who got it. And the conversation kind of went along the lines of, you know, if we're really networked, it's not about having a new digital savvy manager, it's about having a network. And so the whole management infrastructure, the processes, the way of working in a more networked way, it's easy to just go to the default, which is, well, we need somebody in a senior role who is now understanding digital. I think the whole idea of, and I totally get your point, Virpi, about pushing out communication, but for me, it's also very much about having an organization which can synthesize the incoming as well and adapt to incoming and be comfortable with dialogue in a way that most large organizations simply are not calibrated to do. And so the whole nature of communication changes, the whole nature of leadership and management changes. And this is something which is being discussed. It's not like it's not being discussed. But in terms of really thinking about the nature of organization in the digital world, we've yet to have that real awareness of well, this is organization, but it's organization done differently. And I think how we organize and how we think about organizations as loose networks of people who are participative within a proposition, if you like, that's where I'd like to see some organizations taking it further.
Mm-hmm. But David and Louis as well, so do you really agree on this? Because actually for me, you both are tending to argue that companies have to return to put the business value creation at the center of their social business and social collaboration initiatives. So if we put again, I think maybe there's also a problem that we have too long discussed always this cultural thing, this new terms of collaboration, this new terms of communications, that people have a chance with these tools and miss the point or miss the view or the focus on really creating business value with it.
Well, you know, let's not fool ourselves. A business still has to make business. Whether it's social or not, they still have to drive some kind of profit, because otherwise they will be out of business, right? So, and this is actually part of the conversation as well that we're having on the Twitter channel with John Ingham, where, and this is something that I have mentioned a little while ago, where I have moved progressively away from the concept of social, because it still has got that negative baggage in terms of not being associated with a business context. Yes, I know, it's wrong. Most people are wrong when they still cringe to the word social, but still, people have to do a job. They have to do business, they have to drive certain revenue, because then otherwise they're out of the job. So we should not forget that customer value. We should not forget that the actual frontier, the final frontier of a social business, is not necessarily the internal digital transformation. It's not necessarily how they transform their HR processes or how they transform how people get incentivized or awarded, whatever. It's actually providing value to the customers, because if they cannot influence the customer experience, we're wasting our time. We have been wasting our time probably over the last few years because we have always thought that that focus is going to be on changing how organizations work. We cannot change organizations. Let's that clear as well, right? We can only influence certain people to make certain changes, right? And what we need to do is we need to figure out how we're going to make that work in terms of continuing to provide that customer value, because eventually that's why you come to work every day. You don't come to work to use all of these fancy tools and be social. You actually come to work to help your customers achieve a certain goal. And if you don't, I would question your business model that you currently have at the moment, right? And this is what I keep telling people, that we need to have that focus on having that business goal. And the business goal is, where are my customers, how can I help my customers, and how I can help them be successful. Now, mind you, I'm not saying that we should ignore the internal transformation. In fact, when I was working back at IBM, Ginny Rometto, the CEO, had this really nice, lovely quote indicating more or less, and I'm paraphrasing, that in order to influence the client experience, you need to improve the employee experience. So we start on the inside, we customize, and we kind of improve that employee experience so that it reflects on the external client experience. But let's not forget the actual goal, if there is a goal. The business outcome from all of this digital transformation is to go to the final frontier, and the final frontier is go where the customer is and help the customers fix their problems, not your problems, their problems. That's where all of this digital transformation comes in terms of, opening up processes in terms of how people collaborate, how you find experts, how you locate knowledge, how you share that knowledge, how you actually help customers through processes like co-creation to accelerate innovation or whatever else. There's not, we're not losing focus of that. It just needs to have that specific customer value mindset that unless it happens, we're just basically probably wasting our time. And the reason why I'm saying wasting our time is because, yes, most businesses will try to adopt these tools and play with these tools and adapt to them, and you will have the initial round of early adopters, very excited, always into the game and pushing for it. And 1 year, 2 years later, they get tired, they move on to the next thing. Call it big data, call it Internet of Things, call it whatever the crap you want to call it. They will move on. So what do you do afterwards? That's when you have to think about that customer value. Because if you don't, your project is doomed. As simple as that.
David, but isn't this also, this state we're in, isn't this also a little bit of a fault of you all evangelists who are always evangeling that we really have to talk about the culture?
I think that the culture is important. I mean, first thing is I have to agree. It's got to be about value. It's got to be about return on investment. It's got to be actually about real business issues. But if you look at the way that these solutions are evolving inside companies, I spent a bit of time on Monday talking to Kevin Austin, who's going to be speaking at our conference from Shell. And if you listen to what Shell have done with these tools inside their company, they have 50,000 employees participating actively on their network. Happens to be on Yammer. They've created a kind of like their Shell equivalent of YouTube. They've got their equivalent of like an internal Wikipedia. So that, on one level, they've actually done a hell of a lot in terms of using these tools to actually make jobs more effective. And there are particular use cases. I'm not going to talk them through because it will be stealing Kevin's thunder for the conference. But there's some great use cases, but they're happening in pockets. And if you're a new employee to Shell, Do you get told about this in your induction to the company? At the moment, no, you don't. And so part of the problem we've got is that the way that some of this is happening is its solutions evolving inside the company and spreading out. And actually what we need is some leadership from the top to actually say, hey, we're doing this company-wide for these good reasons. And obviously there are good case studies that we know, like Grundfos and others, where they've done that and taken that approach and they've said, hey, we're doing this company-wide because it's goodness. And you know, the other thing about this is that when you look at the companies that are deploying these kind of digital tools, guess what? They make more money, they make more profit, they're more value, they've got more shareholder value in them. So there's actually good business reasons for doing it, but it has to come back to that. That's what it's all about.
But those digital-driven companies, they were digital from the start. We have some kind of voice problem here. They were digital from the start. So the question for me is whether.
Can I just hold you up there, Bjorn?
Yeah.
I'm going to wave goodbye to Anne because she has to turn into a pumpkin.
Thank you for having me for the 45 minutes. I'm sorry I have to dash, but thank you.
Really appreciate it.
So, David, so you mentioned that there are these digital native companies, and I would say they have been digital from the start, so they never had the problem in arguing about an old business model regarding to a digital business model. So, and if you have a big ship, like a big company, and you have at the top maybe the senior top management who agrees on there is a new a future within digital, we have to turn digital, but still they have to bring down their ideas to the organizations, and also bring this into the product departments and so on, that all the parts of the companies are going digital, and then eventually also working differently together by using social tools. So the key question for me is, isn't this really the chance for smaller companies to change it this way, because the big companies are really not have they will change in the long run, but it will always take a longer time.
There is no doubt that, I mean, if you're a new startup or you're a company with 50 or 100 employees, why would you start any other way? You're gonna start with cloud and web apps, and you're going to start with very lean systems. So you're right. Smaller companies, this is a much easier it's much easier for them to start digital and carry on digital and be more effective. Absolutely. So the problem is for the medium and the larger companies who have a legacy of systems to actually change from the old way of doing things to the new way of doing things. But basically, they have to. There are too many examples of companies like Phones for You or Nokia or Kodak, who invented the digital camera, but then couldn't actually give up their old business model of making money from film. And those kind of things are true in all businesses. So I think you're right. The digital native smaller companies, newer companies, can get this and move forwards. The problem is with the larger companies, and there's always inertia for change. But we need more case studies. I mean, I've been looking through what companies are doing. And there are big companies like Shell, like LexisNexis, that are doing this kind of thing successfully. We need to surface those stories more and actually help the rest of the average company recognize that this is a really important thing to do.
So actually we're also running late a little bit on this, always on this 40 minutes expert talk. So my last question to you all would be, so what would your today's wishful thinking for staffing the project team for a social and digital initiative? Who should be on this team? to really drive the project forward? Alan?
I think beyond the evidence that's emerging is that it's sort of back to the future, in that the teams that have worked for implementing software system and that in change in previous generations seem to be what's emerging again. You know, the old saw you need top management support and you need involved users who are actually responsible for delivering the service afterwards, and you need IT support to actually, so you need a multidisciplinary team, and this has been true, I would say, for the last 20 years, and it doesn't seem to be that different in implementing these tools either. So I'd say it looks like the same rules for change management are true here as they were. Now, some of these tools work quite well for they actually are facilitating tools for themselves, if you like, as well, which is quite interesting. In that quite a lot of the collaboration tools actually help the teams install themselves, which is quite ironic. But I'd say by and large, what's emerging from all the case studies is that the rules of technology implementation from the past are still part of the future.
But still, who should be on the team? So, if you are the top manager and you're advising now your organization should do this pathway, who would you put on the team?
So you have to have, in the area that you're trying to impact, you have to have a project champion or somebody who really wants to live that project start to finish. You're going to have some form of IT support. You're probably going to have some form of support of the service, a package or a set of processes. So often that's where the vendor comes in, or somebody's been trained up. So you're going to need those sort of things. You're probably going to have, as in whenever there are people who are impacted by where this project's going in, you're probably going to have representatives from those parts as well. So if the system you're putting in impacts people in sales or impacts people on the shop floor, you need to have people from that side as well just to give their input, because otherwise they don't give their support. And the whole thing has to be supported by the top management, or else the middle management not impacted will slow it down or cause problems.
Okay. David, what is your recommendation for setting up the team?
Well, for me, it's really, I'm totally in agreement with Alan in that the old ways of implementing big systems, we shouldn't throw away any of that knowledge. Totally agree. I think that it has to be the line of business in charge of it, because we're talking about something that's helping the business. I think IT need to be involved, because whatever we're talking about has to actually connect with the legacy systems, the systems of record that I've already got within the company, and HR needs to be involved, because I need to have my employees engaged in this new thing. But it should be driven by the business rather than by IT or rather than by HR.
Yeah, I think it has to be driven by the business for business reasons.
Luis.
I think, if I gather all the experiences of what I have worked with and the clients that I have worked over the course of the years and everything else, I think that one of the things that needs to work out, and partially in agreement with what Alan and David said, is that you need to have a very mixed team, right? And one of the things that I typically do is I start working with the project lead or whatever else, and I basically come back to that person and say, we need to have someone from HR, someone from the IT department, someone from sales, someone from marketing, someone from communication, someone from research, someone from supply chain, from all of the various different business units. And the reason why I ask them always to do that is not necessarily because I want all of the departments to be involved, but the reason why I do that is because I want them all to be knowledgeable about each other's challenges and problems. If you come up front to the table and all of the business units tell you, this is the challenge that I have inside of our business unit, there's a great chance that someone coming from the outside, from the HR department or from the IT department or whatever else, may see a potential solution. So if you have a very mixed group of people coming from each of the various different business units, you will eventually become much more homogeneous as well in terms of how you're going to provoke that transformation, because everyone else will try to understand how they can make it all of a group effort, right? The problem is that most organizations now, they think that it's an IT project. I'm sorry, but it's not a project, it's a program. A project has got a deadline, and it dies, and it dies. A program doesn't. A program lives for as long as the company lives, right? So narrative matters. So typically, rather, the IT department runs the project, or it is all seen as something from communications and marketing. Since you're not in Marcon, you basically disengaged. And since it has got to do with the business units, HR all of a sudden goes into hiding mode. No, they need to all come together. And you're probably gonna say, Bjorn, so who should lead that charge? HR. HR is the only group inside every organization with the ability to transform the organization. And why is that? Because they are the only ones who can change the way people get incentivized and rewarded for the work they do. No one else. So that's what I would start. Great.
Virpi, do you have something to add on this? This was already very much complete, I think. But
complete, and also I haven't been involved in big projects like these gentlemen can probably kind of bring all that kind of experience to the table. But what I would maybe add to that is the project I've been involved in. They exclude people just because, because if you're not the manager of so-and-so, obviously you're not included in the team. But I'm really curious to hear whether any companies have ever used like a social network analysis to kind of find the key people inside companies to kind of who can actually drive change more effectively, or who are the kind of key who people listen to, like really seriously listen to, who might not be managers, who might not be in the right place in the org chart, but who actually have quite a lot of influence internally. I don't know if anyone actually uses that, but to me that would be an interesting way of kind of in addition to that kind of official routes.
Great. Great. Thank you all for participating in this nice discussion round this afternoon. We will continue again with this experts talk, well, probably on 2 weeks' time. So the next one will be on the 24th of October. So, and yeah, happy to have you also with us, or also consume this nice information as an on-demand video, as it's always on YouTube. But if you're interested in discussing social collaboration in the UK, we are happy also to be with us at the conference on the 26th of November. We have a nice program. So I'm just trying to get this on. So just a second. Here we go. We'll be at the Carlton House Terrace, so at the British Academy, so really central in London. So we're happy to have you with us. And yes, see you next time. And that's it. Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
See you later. Bye.